Hello everyone, I'm Charlie and I am going to be doing my presentation on adaptations and supports for young autistic children in the art classroom. Before I begin, I would like to say a brief note about the language used in this presentation. I'm going to be using identity first language instead of person first language due to personal considerations and research. I'll leave you off on a quote by autistic activist Jim Sinclair. It is not possible to separate the autism from the person, and if it were possible, the person you'd have left would not be the same person you started with. So, to go into the research, what is autism? Autism is categorized by the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke as a neurological developmental disorder with challenges in interaction and social communication, as well as restrictive patterns of behavior and interests that are often repetitive as well. Three key considerations for a successful art environment for autistic students consider the sensory needs, the communication needs, and the organization and structure, the general flow of the classroom. Taking a look at sensory processing, many autistic students experience either over or under influence of sensory stimuli. So one student might have a very difficult time touching the art material hand. Take, for example, clay. It is the art educator's job to help them find an alternative means to engage with the material and the lesson at hand without actually physically touching the material. So if you take this clay, you can put it in a plastic bag, you can put a paper towel on off. That way the student is still accessing the material without physically touching it. So how do we make the classroom just accessible and inclusive in general? So if you look at the Center for Applied Special Technologies model of universal design for learning, it says simply that it's meant to be universally inclusive of all students and at what learning ability or level they are at. So it describes multiple means of engagement, representation, action, and expression. So all of these principles that make up universal design for learning require a teacher to display information in various ways, to talk with students in various ways, and for students to be able to respond in various ways. That way, the information can reach everyone. And although the universal design for learning is intended to eliminate individualized accommodations, occasionally some students may require differentiated instructional supports, and that's where appropriate accommodations come into play. Accommodations should be appropriate for the lesson and the student. So it should help them to access the lesson, the content. Art teachers are really encouraged to weigh in on IEP meetings where accommodations would be specified, because otherwise required art tools, materials, or other instructional supports will be otherwise left out for the most part. So how do we take this idea of universal design for learning, and how do we use that to create a more inclusive and accessible art classroom for autistic students? How do we make it actually happen? I think that it all begins within initial teacher education, according to Lawrence and Derby, among others. Teachers are not wholly prepared for autistic students, and sometimes not very welcoming or inclusive. They don't really see the point to making a classroom that's universally inclusive. They're not quite with it. So I believe that the more education within initial teacher prep that is geared towards including students with disabilities, especially autistic students, and how to make the classroom more universally inclusive so that you don't even really have to think too hard about accommodations in the first place, only when they pop up, would be incredibly beneficial, especially with teachers that are sort of non-general education, so art teachers, music teachers, physical education teachers. Another component about this is how we treat disability in art. This can be take into account the art education realm as well as just the art world in general. How do we represent artists with disabilities? Do we represent them? And how should we celebrate the ways in which people with disabilities make art? Um, this will help better reach all students, especially autistic students. If they see themselves well represented in the art world, then they're more likely to become engaged with the content and the material. So, with these initial teacher prep and this focus of disability in art, I believe that will help create a more universally inclusive classroom that students will feel successful and be able to better engage with their learning in. Thank you.